Hello and welcome to Global Lens. Over the next 30 minutes, we put the spotlight on all the top stories from around the world. I'm Parikshit Luthra. These are the big global headlines we are tracking. US President Trump and Prime Minister Modi exchange conciliatory messages. Once again, Trump says trade negotiations will continue and he looks forward to speaking with Modi in the coming weeks. Prime Minister Modi calls US a natural partner and expresses confidence over a trade deal. Poland says a huge number of Russian drones entered its airspace during Moscow's attack on Ukraine, adds 3 or 4 were shot down, calls it an act of aggression, summons the Russian envoy. EU and NATO condemned the attack, calling it intentional. Kremlin is yet to respond to the charges. Israel draws global condemnation after bombing Qatar's capital Doha, targeting Hamas leadership. UK, France, Saudi Arabia denounce the strikes. Qatar claims there was no warning from the US about the strikes, which killed 5 Hamas members and a Qatari security officer. Let's start with today's trading action. It was green across the screen for markets across Asia, tracking gains on Wall Street as hopes for a rate cut rose. Investors also assessed August inflation data from China. South Korea's Kospi and Japan's Nikkei hit record highs. Back home, Nifty ended higher for the 6th straight day, led higher by IT stocks. European markets traded in the red, while US's S&P 500 hit new highs after the latest inflation data. But our continuing top focus this evening. US President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi have exchanged positive messages amid the tariff standoff. In a social media post, Trump said that the two countries are continuing negotiations to address the trade barriers, and he's looking forward to speaking with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Trump wrote, and I quote, "I feel certain that there will be no difficulty in coming to a successful conclusion for both of our great countries," end of quote. PM Modi echoed the sentiment, calling India and the US close friends and natural partners. The Prime Minister said both teams are working to conclude talks at the earliest. He added, and I quote, "Our trade negotiations will pave the way for unlocking the limitless potential of the India-US partnership," end of quote. The leader's comments came even as the 50% tariff on India remains in place. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that the messages indicate trade talks are back on track. Sources also say that officials from India and US are likely to have an exchange of trade delegations soon in a bid to find common ground. Meanwhile, CNBC has reported that Trump has asked the European Union to hit China and India with tariffs of up to 100% over their Russia oil purchases. Trump made the demand during a meeting with EU and Ukrainian officials. Trump reportedly indicated that Washington would mirror any such measures taken by the European Union. Joining us now to discuss this further is Atul Keshap, President, US-India Business Council. Thank you very much, Ambassador Keshap, for joining us. Clearly, a very good sign that negotiations are back on track. What do you think is going to be the next step?
Well, Parikshit, thanks for having me. Sweet music from both leaders is much better than the sour tones of the recent past. So we issued a statement applauding their constructive tones, and we appreciate these truths that have come out from the Truth Social platform by both leaders. The next step, I think, clearly reflects that some back-channel diplomacy has been taking place between the two governments, and there may be some new understandings. I would speculate that, of course, in addition to the very narrow parameters of the trade deal related to tariffs and whatnot, there may be some potentially also some geostrategic issues at play, because as you mentioned in your intro, it is quite unusual for the Russians to attack Poland with drones. That is a test of NATO's Article 5 commitments. And so the world is getting more and more uncertain and unpredictable. The war in Europe could get worse. There are indications that the Eastern Front may get wider. And so the US and India, as pillars of stability and of democratic governments, really do need to get this done in a constructive way, and in a way that sends a very positive psychological message to investors and the business community in both countries.
Right. I would also like to ask you about your own recommendation, or USIBC's recommendation to the White House about India-US relations and how to tackle the trade negotiations and bring the relationship back on track as well.
Well, here's the thing. Businesses will, of course, respond to the leadership signals by government. And for 25 years, our partnership between the U.S. and India has been getting closer and closer, and it has expanded very ambitiously and productively into technology. I'm speaking to you from Palo Alto, California, the very birthplace of so much of the technology that rules our world today. And it is the birthplace of innovation as well. There's no stronger connection between the US and India than in the innovation and technology economy. So if the governments can forge a pathway that intensifies that collaboration, I would frankly much rather the United States and India lead the world on artificial intelligence, semiconductors, quantum computing than our adversaries. So this is where the psychological signals by government are critical. And if they can create the right framework or strengthen the framework for private sector collaboration on these key technologies, on defense, on much else besides, then I think the investor community will take great heart and you will see a lot more announcements and deals. I think people are holding off due to the uncertainty in the negotiation.
Right. I would also like to ask you about what do you think has brought the US president here to have some sort of understanding with India? And now, if this issue were to be resolved, what do the two sides need to do?
Well, first of all, Parikshit, they need to have a negotiation that includes both leaders. These are two great leaders of two great democratic nations. And at the end of the day, any deal made by either set of bureaucrats or cabinet members needs to go to the leaders. And I think that if the leaders can talk and strike a deal that includes all of the many issues on the table between the US and India, then it's a really good, durable deal and will be very good for both countries and for, as I said, investment and business confidence. So what needs to be done is some quiet talking and rolling up sleeves to get through some of the challenging issues. Friends talk in private. They work out agreements in private that help resolve things and put things back on track. So obviously there's some tariff questions that need to be addressed. As I said, there may be, of course, now some issues related to Russian oil that need to be addressed. And when two governments as big as the US and India talk, they understand that neither one can turn on a dime. And so there have to be glide paths, if you will, toward the end state that we all desire. And I think that the negotiators are very accomplished. The cabinet members involved are very accomplished. And of course, then if we can get a constructive framework done, then it goes to leaders and hopefully gets closed. And then the US and India continue their 25 years of convergence and partnership.
Right. Do you expect the US government to relent on the 25% additional tariff anytime soon? Because while President Trump made a very positive post on Truth Social, he also said that European Union should impose 100% tariffs on China and India for being buyers of Russian oil. So how do we see these two statements?
Well, look, this is signaling, public and private, and it reflects a growing alarm by the United States about the war in Europe, the Russians trying to seize territory by conquest in a very 19th century way. The potential expansion of that front is very, very worrisome. So the president and the U.S. government are signaling their concern that the ability of the Russians to sustain their war effort is creating a real geostrategic problem. So this is where the two leaders can talk as friends and work out how they can help one another. Obviously, the tariffs are on the table. The Russian oil purchases are on the table. There are things that India wants from us. There are things that the United States wants from India. Friends sit down, put everything on the table, and conclude a deal. We've done it before. Look at the nuclear deal, one of the trickiest negotiations you can possibly imagine between two governments. It got done. I recognize the politics in India and in America. I recognize that these are leaders of democratic and highly diverse nations, but we have proven that we can make very challenging, complicated negotiations come to a good point. We have come to agreement on difficult things in the past, including, for instance, the Iranian oil purchases. So I'm confident that with good faith and with certainly the very sweet tones of these recent social media posts by the two leaders, it creates a very strong basis for working through in a productive and collaborative manner to get to a reasonable accommodation, one of the other of the one, so that we can both go forward together.
Right. How soon do you expect the two leaders to talk? They've been literally coordinating responses on social media. What next in terms of having in-person talks between the trade delegations? How soon do you expect that? And can we see a call between Modi and Trump in the coming days?
Well, this is for the leaders and the governments to decide. USIBC has been encouraging persistently that the two sides pick up the phone or get on Zoom or whatever and talk through their difficulties and not air them out in the public arena, which is not what friends do. So, look, in this era of technology, they could be talking even as we speak. It doesn't require that there be an in-person meeting. Indeed, in-person meetings are so much more complicated given the various calendars and schedules. The President of the United States is well known to be a person who takes and gives a lot of phone calls. So there's no issue in sort of getting onto his schedule and having talks. I think that this needs to be done quicker rather than over a longer period of time. You know, time is really not our friend. So whatever methods the governments are using to talk, I urge them to do so quickly, and I urge them to do so privately.
Very quickly and very briefly, what is the average tariff that you're hoping for, which will be the best case scenario for India and US companies?
Well, the very best tariff and the very best system is one that the United States Chamber of Commerce has always believed in, which is zero tariffs, an open system for innovation, no non-tariff barriers, open markets, open societies, freedom and happiness for humanity. This is the method that has raised standards of living all around the world over the past 75 years. It has worked. It will continue to work. And if we open up our economies, we actually can greatly improve the standards of living of our people and enhance the rates of growth. So I'm all for economic liberalization, and I would hope that we get to zero or close to it.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Keshap, for joining us on the program, saying that both sides need to find a glide path and end this uncertainty soon because it's not good for US investors who are looking at India. We're taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. An uneasy calm grips Nepal as the army imposes nationwide curfew. Dozens detained on charges of arson, vandalism and individual attacks after lawmakers get roughed up on the streets. We discuss what's next for the political landscape of the country on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens. An uneasy calm prevails in Nepal 24 hours after a violent anti-corruption stir led by Gen Z stormed the corridors of power. Prime Minister Oli resigned yesterday as protesters went on a rampage. Nepal's army has imposed a nationwide curfew. Kathmandu airport has reopened for operations yesterday. Protesters stormed and set fire to several key government buildings, including international convention centers, which house the federal parliament. Thick plumes of smoke could be seen from the India side of the Nepal border. Politicians did not escape the protesters' anger either. Nepal's finance minister was chased and assaulted on the streets of Kathmandu. At least 25 people have been killed and over 600 have been injured so far. Meanwhile, the name of former Chief Justice Sushila Karki has been proposed by a section of protesters to lead the interim government in Nepal. She is the first female Chief Justice of the country whose tenure was cut short after lawmakers accused her of biased judgments. She is widely considered as a strong voice against corruption. And joining us on the program now is Manjeev Singh Puri, former ambassador to Nepal. Ambassador Puri, thank you so much for being with us. All right, we are now joined, we're told that Ambassador Puri will be with us in some time from now, but Mahesh Kushwaha, former research fellow is at CESIF, is joining us. Mahesh, could you give us a sense of how this choice of an interim head, former CJI Karki, will be for Nepal and the protesters?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. First of all, I think we have to understand how the name has come out and how and where we are at the moment with the name. So for this, I think we need to also understand that the Gen Z protesters, there are several groups who are still in the process of, finalizing or coming to a consensus on who they would be on board with. So while a section of them have proposed the name for Sushila Karki, others are they are opposing her name and they want the name of Kathmandu's Mayor Balendra Saha as the government interim government lead, and for that they're also demanding that the parliament be dissolved before that. So there is a very, it's an uncertain situation right now as we talk, that there are a group of youths literally outside the army headquarters building. They are confused. They are still in the process of discussing among themselves. And we saw in the news that the army chief or the army has told them to go back and come tomorrow morning, and with all the new discussants or whoever is going to represent the dialogue. And there's a big confusion and also cynicism among people that the army is prolonging this process. So, this is a very highly fluid situation, and we are yet to see how the events are going to unfold.
All right. Mahesh, could you also give us a sense of what's led to this anger? There are reports that this was building up. There were Facebook groups, social media groups for the past few months who were expressing anger about the state of affairs, about corruption, about unemployment, about lack of opportunities in the country. Was this a spontaneous movement only linked to the social media restrictions, or there was something bigger that was boiling?
So I think, for this, we have to understand the bigger context of how things progressed and like the immediate triggers, but also at the same time, the larger background context. And so we saw in the immediate past that there has been a wave of protests across the region in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, Philippines, even Malaysia. And we saw that even if we go further back in Bangladesh and stuff. So these examples are in the backdrop of the developments in Nepal. So if we look at the events immediately before the social media ban, there was a social media campaign being led not by any particular leader or Gen Z leader. It was very organic, it seemed. And people in Nepal, or young people in Nepal and from across the world, they were posting with a hashtag of Nepo Baby and whatnot, and they were publicly shaming and naming these kids of current politicians. And so this was a movement or protest, social media movement that was building up against corruption, demanding lack of accountability, more transparency, and more efficient democracy, I would say. So this was happening, but what happened later was, in the name of social media compliance, the only led government banned these apps. And so when that happened, that was the immediate trigger. People started, they were using VPNs and they were using alternative ways to access these platforms. And then I think that's what led to the preparations to hit the streets. And I would like to also bring to the attention of the immediate incident. There was a statute convention of the UML party going on in Kathmandu, and a car of one of the provincial ministers hit hit a pedestrian, a young girl, I'd say, and the prime minister made a very insensitive remark, and I think that enraged the public, and that was all these things were leading up, and the public frustration, and that kind of led to the Gen Z or the young groups that were forming to hit the streets in Kathmandu. And it was very, I would say, urban-centric movement in the beginning. But that developed rapidly, and we all know what happened by the end of the first day of the protest. So, and that kind of led to the frustration quickly turning into anger.
Mahesh, also, what do you think is now going to happen in the country? Who is going to take up the leadership position? Is there going to be some sort of interim government that will be formed till elections will take place?
Yeah, that has been the demands coming in from many groups of these Gen Z protesters. And I think we have to understand one thing, that the Kathmandu's mayor Balendra Shah, he floated the idea yesterday evening that, he was trying to calm the protesters down, but he mentioned something important that I think some of the protesters are clinging on to. He said that the parliament should be dissolved before they should engage in any sort of dialogue. And I think that has been a very important I think, factor that is kind of that's leading for these resistance among some of the groups. So, but what's going to happen next is it's still very up in the air. There is a very suspicious delay coming in from the Nepal army. They're pushing it, pushing the dialogues and formation of an interim government. But we also have to, I think, look at the context, the constitutional provisions that that there is a lack of clear provision that would give clear direction to how or where the parliament, without dissolving the parliament, the government would be formed. So according to the constitution, if I may, I want to add that according to the Article 76 of the Constitution, there are provisions for forming new government from among the parliamentarians that are there. So,
okay, Mahesh, I'd like to thank you for joining us on the program. With that, we've come to the end of Global Lens here on CNBC TV 18 Prime. Thank you for watching and goodbye.